Black Hearts in Battersea by Joan Aiken, Chapter 2. When Simon woke next morning, he lay for a few minutes wondering where he was. It seemed strange to wake in a bed, in a room in the middle of a city. He was used to waking in a cave in the woods, or in summer to sleeping out under the trees, being roused by the birds to lie looking up at the green canopy overhead. He felt uneasy so far away from the grass and trees of the forest home where he had lived for the past 5 years. Outside in the street he could hear wheels and voices. The kitten was awake and mewing for its breakfast. After Simon had fed it the last of the milk, he wandered across the landing to the empty room and gazed out of the window. The tide was nearly full, and the Thames was a bustle of activity. Simon watched the shipping, absorbed, until a whole series of church clocks striking culminated in the solemn boom of St. Paul's itself, and reminded him that he could not stand here all day gazing while time slipped by. It was still needful to discover Dr. Field's whereabouts, and to earn some money. Kind, wealthy Sir Willoughby Green, who had befriended Simon in Yorkshire, had offered to pay his art school fees, but Simon had no intention of being beholden if he could avoid it, and proposed to look for work, which would provide enough money for his tuition as well as food and rent. He had a considerable fund of quiet pride, and had purposefully waited to leave Willoughby Chase until the Green family was away on a visit. Thus he had been spared a sad farewell, and had also avoided the risk of hurting Lord Willoughby's feelings by refusing the money which he knew the liberal-hearted gentleman would have pressed on him. Munching a piece of bread, Simon tucked the kitten into the bosom of his frieze jacket. Then he ran softly downstairs. The house was silent. Evidently the Twites were asleep. Simon resolved that he would not wait until they woke to question them about Dr. Field, but would go to the Academy of Art which he was to attend, where Dr. Field also studied, to ask for the doctor's address. Unfortunately, Simon did not know the name of the academy, but he remembered that it was in Chelsea. He stole past the closed doors of the Twites, resolving that when he returned in the evening he would move the furniture from the room where he had slept into the one overlooking the river. It had a pleasant view, and appeared to be in a superior state of cleanliness. Opening the front door, Simon found Ditto Twite sitting on the front steps, kicking her heels discontentedly. She was wearing the same stained dress that she had had on yesterday, and did not appear to have washed her face or brushed her hair since Simon had last seen her. "Hello!" she said alertly. "Where are you going?" "Out," said Simon. He had no intention of retelling all his doings to her, and having them discovered by the Twite family. Ditto's face fell. "What about my donkey ride?" she said, looking at him from under where her brows would have been had she had any. Although she was an unattractive brat, she had such a forlorn, neglected air that Simon's heart softened. "All right," he said. "I'll get Caroline and give you a ride, if you'll do something for me while I'm fetching her." "What?" said Ditto suspiciously. "Wash your face." He went whistling up the street. After he had given Ditto her ride, he asked, "What time is your father likely to get up?" "Not till noon, perhaps not till 3 or 4. Pa works evenings and sleeps all day. If Penny or I wake him, he throws his hautboy at us." Simon could not imagine what a hautboy might be, but it seemed plain that no information was to be had from Mr. Twite until the evening. "Well, goodbye. I'll see you when I come home." "What do you do with yourself all day? Do you go to school?" "No," she said peevishly. "Sometimes Pa teaches me the hautboy, or Aunt Tinty sets me sums. Uncle Buckle used to teach me, but he doesn't any more. Mostly I does tasks for Ma, peel the spuds, sweep the stairs, stoke the furnace." Furnace!" exclaimed Simon. "That was the name." "What name?" "Oh, nothing that concerns you. The principal of the art academy where I am to learn painting." He had thrown the information over his shoulder as he walked away, not thinking that it could be of any possible interest to Ditto Twite. He would have been surprised to see the sudden flash of alert calculation in her eyes. Simon asked his way through the streets till he reached Chelsea, no great distance, as it proved. Here he inquired of a man in the uniform of a beadle where he would find an academy of art presided over by a Dr. Furness. The beadle scratched his head.
Dr. Furnace, he said. Can't say I recall the name.
Simon's heart sank. Was Dr. Furnace to prove as elusive as Dr. Field? But then the beetle turned and shouted, Dan! to a man who was just emerging from an arched gateway, leading a horse and gaily painted dust cart with a cracked wheel. Hello, replied the man. What's the row?
Young cove here wants Furnace's Art Academy. Know what he means?
Both men turned and stared at Simon. The man, Dan, who was dressed in moleskin clothes, from cap to leggings, slowly chewed a straw to its end, spat, and then said,
Furnace's Academy. Oh, I know what he means. He means Rivieres.
Ah, said the beetle wisely.
That's what you mean, me boy. You mean Rivieres.
Is it far from here? Said Simon, his hope rising.
Matter of 10 minutes' walk, said Dan. Going that way myself, I'll take you.
Thank you, sir. They strolled off, Dan leading the horse.
I'm going to me brother-in-law's, he explained. Does the smithying and wheelwrighting for the parish. Nice bit of business.
Simon was interested. He had worked for a blacksmith himself and knew a fair amount about the wheelwright's trade. There must be plenty of customers for a wheelwright in London, he said, looking about him. I've never seen so many different kinds of carriages before. Where I come from, it's mostly closed coaches and farm carts.
Countrified sort of stuff, said Dan pityingly. No art in it, and mind you, there's a lot of art in the coachmaker's trade. You get the length without the nth. It looks poky and old-fashioned, to my mind. Contrariwise, you get the nth without enough body, and it looks regular hurrah's nest. Now there's a lovely bit of bodywork. See that barouche coming along, the plum-coloured one with the olive drab outwork. Ah, very racy, that is. Duke of Battersea's trot box, know it well. Seen it at me brother-in-law's for repair, cracked panel.
Simon turned and saw an elegantly turned-out vehicle, in which was seated an elderly lady, dressed in the height of fashion, with waterfalls of diamonds ornamenting her apple-peel satin gown, and a tremendous ostrich plume headdress. She was accompanied by a pretty young girl who held a reticule, 2 billiard cues, a large shopping basket, and a small spaniel.
Why,
Simon exclaimed, that's Sophie! He ran across the street, and the young girl turned her head sharply, but then a high-closed carriage came between Simon and the barouche, and a succession of other traffic following after. No second view of the girl could be obtained.
I know that girl. She's a friend of mine,
Simon said, overjoyed. He looked at Dan with shining eyes.
Ah, Duchess's lady-maid, maybe. Nice-looking young girl. Very good position, good family to work for. Duke, very affable sort of gentleman, when he comes out of those everlasting experiments of his, bugs, chemicals, mice, queer set-up for a lord. But his lady's a proper lady, so I've been told. Of course, young Bakerloo ain't up to much.
Where does he live, the Duke of Battersea? Asked Simon, who had not been paying much attention.
Battersea Castle, of course, when the family's in London. Places in the country, too, naturally, Dorset, Yorkshire, and... Now, where you met the girl? Now, here's me brother-in-law's establishment, and down by the river, that big place with the pillars is Rivieres.
Dan's brother-in-law's place was almost as impressive as the art academy beyond. Inside the big double gates, over which ran the legend Cobb's Coaches in gold, was a wide yard containing every conceivable kind of coach, carriage, phaeton, barouche, landau, chariot, and curricle, in every imaginable state of disrepair. A shed at the side contained a forge with bellows roaring and sparks blowing, while elsewhere lathes turned, carpenters hammered, and chips flew. Do you suppose I could get work here? Simon asked impressively. Of an evening, when I'm finished at the academy.
No harm in asking, is there? Always plenty to do. At Sam Cobb's, that I do know, depends on what you can do, doesn't it?
Dan led his cart through the gates, then lifted his voice and bawled,
Sam!
A large, cheerful man came toward them. Why, bless me, he exclaimed. If it's not old Dan back again, I don't know what you do to your car, Dan. I don't indeed. I believe it's fast driving. I believe...
You're out of an evening carriage racing on the Brighton Road. You can't expect the parish dust carts to stand up to it, Dan. No, you can't, my boy." Dan took these pleasantries agreeably, and asked after his sister Flossie. Then he said, "Here's a young cove, Sam. Wants a bit of evening work. Any use to you?" "Any use to me?" said Mr. Cobb, summing up Simon with a shrewd but friendly eye. "Depends what he can do, eh? Looks so well set up, young'un. What can you do, young'un? Can you carpenter?" "Yes," said Simon. "Done any blacksmith work?" "Yes," said Simon. "Used to horses?" "Yes," said Simon. "Ever tried your hand at ornamental painting?" said Mr. Cobb, gesturing toward a little greengrocer's cart, newly and beautifully ornamented with roses and lettuces. "This sort of thing, or emblazoning." He waved at a carriage with a coat of arms on the panel. "I can paint a bit," said Simon. "That's why I've come to London, to study painting." "Proper all-rounder, ain't said Mr. Cobb, rolling his eyes in admiration. "You best take him on, Sam, then you'll be able to retire," Dan remarked. "Well, I like a young'un who has confidence in himself." I like a bit of spunk, and dear knows there's a place of work. Tell you what, young'un, you come round here this evening, 5ish, and I'll see what you can do. Agreeable?" "Thank you very much, sir," Simon answered cheerfully. "And thank you for setting me on my way," he said to Dan, who winked at him in a friendly manner. "Good-bye, young'un." "Now then, Dan," said Mr. Cobb. "It's early, to be sure, but there's such a nip in the air these misty mornings. What do you say to a little drop of the organ grinder's oil?" And we'll pause there.